In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to use a tree branch as a loom for weaving. In this example, we'll be using a branch, yarn, and some scissors. Begin by tying the end of the yarn that you're warping with using a slip knot to the bottom arm of the branch. I'm using about an arm's length of yarn to warp this branch, and I balled up the rest of this yarn to make it easier to work with. Wrap the yarn up and over the front of the top arm of the branch, around the back of the branch, and then from right to left, cross your warping yarn over the strand you just pulled tight, bringing the yarn back around the back of the branch again, and then pulling it forward and downward to wrap around the bottom arm of the branch. Wrap it around the back left side of that second warp strand you just created, cross it horizontally to the right side, and then wrap it around the back of the branch again. Then carry that yarn back up to the top arm of the branch, around the back of the branch, around the warp strand from right to left, around the back of the branch, and pull it downward to the bottom arm of the branch again. And you're going to keep continuing this pattern of wrapping the yarn around the branch, around the warp strand, around the branch, and then pulling it taut to continue on the other side. So here again, we're at the top, we go around the branch, and then we go around the warp strand from right to left, around the branch and down, wrapping around the branch, and then coming around the warp strand from left to right this time, back around the branch, and then pulling the yarn back up to the top arm of the branch. Continue this pattern until you're done warping your branch. When you're finished creating your warp, you can secure your yarn by completing your last over the branch around the warp strand and then tying a simple knot around the warp strand. Use your scissors to trim off any loose ends and you're ready to begin weaving. In this example, I'm using a few different colors. And I'm just going to be weaving a simple pattern of over, under each warp strand. This is called a plain weave, and it's the most basic kind of weaving that you can do. And to begin with, I'm leaving the end of my first color of yarn just loose at the end, but making sure I'm not pulling too hard so as to pull it loose from the warp strands. And I'm just going over and under each warp strand with my first color of yarn, which is orange. And when I reach the end of my first row, I'm making sure that it's nice and taut, but it's not pulling the end out. And then I'm going to return and go the opposite direction to create the second row of my weaving, making sure that if I went under a warp strand on the first row, that this time I'm going over that warp strand on the second row. And this alternating over under as the rows build up is what creates this woven structure. So in this example, I'm getting creative using different colors. You can also use different textures of yarn to complete your project. And if you'd like to explore further beyond the plain weave, you can branch out and explore different styles of weaving patterns such as twill, satin, or basket weave. And we'll have some examples in our print tutorial of resources where you can learn more about different weaving techniques. This project is meant to be displayed in the branch like a frame, but if you did want to remove your weaving from the branch, you can carefully cut the warp strands where you wrapped them around the branches. And just make sure that you don't remove those warp strands from the weaving itself or it will fall apart. You can find more tutorials like this one on our website at uticacreativereuse.org under Reuse Resources. Thanks for watching.